Oh, fantastic. I see so many people joining us already. A prompt group of people, which I always appreciate. We'll just give it one more minute as some folks join in. Okay, fantastic. Well, welcome everyone to this Equal Voice discussion, The Road to Leadership and How Canadian Political Leadership Contests Work. What a timely discussion this one is, just given that the Liberal Party leadership race will actually determine who the next Prime Minister is in a matter of days. So it's a very exciting topic today. I want to welcome all of you and I want to welcome our panelists. This conversation will be recorded because while you are here watching, there are many more who will be watching this later. So I'm excited for the conversation. We have Brianne La Pierre, Marla Di Candia, and Huw Williams with us today. Brianne is a Chief of Staff. Marla has worked as the Deputy Campaign Director of Operations for the Ontario NDP, and Huw Williams is the President of Impact Public Affairs, just years of political experience between them. So today's discussion, what does it take to run for leader for a political party in Canada, from selling party memberships to securing endorsements to mobilizing grassroots support? Leadership races are high-stakes contests that test political skill, strategy, and resilience. A touch different than a regular campaign, and we're going to dive into exactly how that works. We're going to start off with some intros. Brianne, do you want to start us off and tell us all about your experience with campaigns and leadership races?
I would love to. Thank you so much, Allie, and thank you everybody here this morning. My name is Brianne, and I'm coming to you all from Vancouver. I'm currently Chief of Staff to Joyce Murray, Liberal MP in Vancouver Quadra. I would say my experience is probably a little bit different than the rest on the panel here. I've had significantly less experience, but I've had to see some very different opinions, different political landscapes. I really only joined politics in 2020. And since then, I've worked on 3 campaigns and now the leadership campaign as well. And in that time, being a Liberal, I've seen us dip to the lowest, worst, we're not feeling good, to now this sort of different, we're feeling kind of good, we're cautiously optimistic. So really, in my 5 years here, it's been quite a different kind of thing that I'm experiencing. But in terms of me, I've managed campaigns for the BC NDP and also with the Liberal Party of Canada. And I'm also just on several boards, the Women's Commission in BC and the Young Liberals in BC as well.
Brianne, give yourself more credit. While you have just been in the game for a short period of time, the amount of campaigns that you have worked on is incredible. Marla, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marla Di Candia. I'm in Toronto. I've been fortunate to work in politics for over 25 years. I've had the fortunate experience to travel across the country and work provincially in Nova Scotia to British Columbia. My last job, I guess, in political life, because I've taken a little bit of a hiatus, was working for Rachel Notley, who was the Premier of Alberta, as her Director of Tour. But I also worked most extensively in Ontario with Andrea Horwath while she was leader on her leadership campaign, and then throughout the time that she was leaders or Director of Leader's Office, and then positioning into the Deputy Director of the 2019 campaign as operations. But I've gotten to work for leaders and premiers across the country, and I'm very lucky to be a part of this space. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this discussion. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for joining us, Marla. I'm very excited to hear about the differences between the various jurisdictions that you've worked
Mm,
on as well, because every province runs things a little differently too.
absolutely.
You.
Yeah, glad to be at Allie. Thank you for bringing the energy as the moderator, and what an impressive panel that you have. And it's a little bit intimidating to be the only man on the panel when you're talking about equal voice and getting more women involved in politics. But I'm a firm believer that we have to bring men into the conversation to move the dial on getting more women involved and encouraging women to be involved. On the equal voice side of the equation, I've been very involved with equal voice for decades now. I was reflecting in our pre-conversation about a conversation I had at the Equal Voice Gala with Prime Minister Trudeau, when we both talked about being involved with equal voice before it was fashionable. We need to make it fashionable and continue to be fashionable, particularly when we see all the pushback against DEI initiatives coming out of the States. So equal voice is just a pillar of what they do. And I echo your comments about Brianne. I mean, all that experience in the last 5 years is probably more relevant than the 40 years I've had doing it, because you're more up to date than I'll ever be. So, happy to be here. I began working on leadership campaigns in the 80s, took on senior leadership roles with Jean Charest's campaign in 1993, which was ultimately unsuccessful. Kim Campbell became Canada's first prime minister, and I finished my career in the prime minister's office block under Kim Campbell. Very, very proud to have worked with her. And then took on successive roles, both for leadership campaigns in Ontario and federally, and was lucky enough to also serve in senior campaign roles for numerous national political campaigns. So happy to be here, happy to contribute, and I've got 3 daughters who are all actively engaged in politics and keep me straight.
Well, we love a political girl dad. Huw, I'm going to stay with you. Let's start off with, what is the biggest difference, in your opinion, between a party leadership race and an election?
Yeah, I would say that the most important thing, sometimes you say election campaigns are all about the economy, stupid, to quote James Carville, the great Democratic strategist who's certainly outspoken these days against the Trump administration and deserves a lot of airtime. But if in leadership campaigns, it's all about the members. The top 3 things you have to worry about is members, members, and members. And to get there, you've got to do a bunch of different things that we'll work on. But lots of people have lost leadership campaigns because they focused on things that were extraneous to signing up members, or in the old days, signing up delegates. So you've got to be actually concerned about how do you move those numbers and people who will actually vote and deliver those votes for those leadership.
Marla, you've worked on how many leadership campaigns?
I've worked on a few leadership campaigns, but I've also mostly worked on central campaigns, provincially or federally. But my largest leadership campaign, I think, was the Bill Blakey. I ran Bill Blakey's leadership campaign against Jack Layton. Jack Layton proved successful and became the leader of the Ontario NDP, or the Ontario NDP, of the federal NDP. So I think that was a real eye-opening experience, and how to run a leadership campaign and how to have impact nationwide. It's so different provincially than it is federally. It's so much more difficult.
And what's your take on the membership position that Huw mentioned for leadership races? Of course, that is what you
Mhm.
need for victory. And so,
Yeah.
do you think that it's different to connect with members versus in a general campaign?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in a leadership campaign, it's members first, right? That is your goal. And it's very difficult because you have such a diverse, you know, such a large group of people to communicate with, and having the right grassroots organization in each province to help build that membership vote is really key to strengthening, the amount of members that will hopefully catapult you into the leadership position. So it's really it's a tough road, but absolutely worth it, because you get to understand, you know, the country so much better, and understand that each province is unique on their issues, and how you need to communicate with them.
Oh, absolutely. Brianne, we just finished up a provincial campaign in BC, and so you got the experience of a general election, and then you almost immediately went into a leadership campaign. What's the biggest takeaway for the difference between the two?
I would totally agree with, Hugh's point about members. And I would almost say that a leadership race is divided in two pieces. The first part is signing up your members, and the second part is getting those members to vote. So, in a general election, you're hearing from more broad, diverse sets of ideas and folks from different backgrounds, but it's almost harder when you're trying to sign up your own members because they put you to a bit of a higher standard. This is their party. They they want us to win and they are going to grill you, which is good, as they should. But I think that that's almost an interesting contrast. And I sometimes see that as well at the doors, like on a general election, when you knock on a door of, somebody that's actually supportive, they might question you a little bit more because they have a bit of a higher standard for you. So that's just something I've noticed.
Well, they're more intimately aware as members, right, of what the policy is. They've likely read the thick policy platforms as well. And so you're totally right, Brianne. I'm going to stay with you because you've mentioned that we've gone into a little bit of the strategy. So what strategies have you found most effective for signing up members? This is mobilizing the grassroots or support, or an emphasis on endorsements. Some campaigns love them. Some campaigns think that they are potentially a waste of time. What strategies work for leadership races?
I definitely think endorsements are important at the beginning. As you kind of go, through the campaign, it becomes less and less important. I would almost say an endorsement is great if you're trying to detract other people from joining the race. You kind of scare them off with those big names. And then, as you go forward, you want to spend a lot less time working on all of that. But I would also say on a leadership, those endorsements are so important, especially when you're trying to get them from caucus. If people see that a majority of your colleagues or your future colleagues are supporting you, I would say that, they're pretty good judges of character. But I don't think it's the most important thing. I really think it's the personal connection. So getting your candidate to literally physically make as many phone calls and shake as many hands as possible. It's, half the battle, I feel like, is being the person that asks first or the person that reaches out first. So really having that ground game is, I would say, the most important thing in terms of
You
strategy.
really have described the pillars of a good ground game. Huw, Brianne just brought up the point of phone calling, phone calling, phone calling. Between phone calling and door knocking, what strategies do you think work best for a leadership race?
Yeah, I would just to build on what Brianne was saying, one of the challenges, you need to sign up those members, but how do you get them to believe you're a candidate in the first place? And you've got to build that buzz somehow. So obviously endorsements are one of the ways to do it. Your social media and your media game is important. We've seen countless leadership candidates who have great credentials, but they just never quite get over that mark of being a believable candidate. I think, Karina Gould's a great example in this last election, who maybe wasn't as well known to Canadians overall, but really came to build her credibility through her media interviews, her social media contacts, and became a viable candidate. And that that then translates into membership. So at the same time, you have to recognize members are the whole game. You can't sign members unless you build that buzz. So all of the tools we'll talk about here build that buzz. And maybe just one plug for getting involved, because if you're a young woman or anybody across the political spectrum, there is no better way to get involved in a political party than a leadership campaign, because they really need that extra help to get involved. And there's lots of opportunity that goes beyond getting involved in a national campaign, and it gives you just a I think a terrific experience right off the bat when you choose a candidate you believe in.
Marla, I saw you nodding your head as Huw was saying that.
Yeah.
What is it about the beauty of a leadership campaign for bringing in people?
It's just the new voices. It's like, the idea of creating a movement and bringing those people along with you. And how do you do that? And when there's sort of, a younger voices or multicultural voices that stand behind you, it's the excitement of reaching out to those voters and using them to help reach out to those voters to grow your base. So it really um draws on, helps to bring people into the fold, into the movement. And I always believe that if you build it, they will come. And that's old WP Kinsella theory, but there is an excitement to bringing new members and new voices on board.
Before we get into the modern digital campaigning, what are some of those grassroots campaigning tactics that are different within a leadership race, Marla?
Well, I mentioned earlier, having really good on the ground leaders, like coordinators, people who work urban, work rural, work in multicultural communities that are your voices to bring those voices into the fold. Having those really good candidates as sort of captains of your movement to help them galvanize support in their communities, in their cities, in their townships. I think that is one of the strongest ways in which you can build your membership. That
Oh,
ground campaign is key.
oh, absolutely. Which kind of dives into the next question here, Huw. The digital campaign evolved in leadership races, and how does it compare to traditional tactics? With the various tools available now, we've evolved from the clipboard and paper to walking around with an iPad and an app on our phones as well. How have you found these changes?
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating to figure out what the right mix is between the traditional and the more digital means. The digital game is absolutely front and center today. Every leadership campaign is thinking digital first, not just with respect to outreach to individual members, but with respect to content. So when they're having a live event, they're thinking about, okay, this live event is going to take place, but how can we turn this into that digital moment? Because your opportunity to connect with Canadians and potential members is just so much bigger online than you could ever hope for in person. So, thinking digital first is absolutely the name of the game in today's environment, even when you look at other means in terms of making that happen. The truth behind today, though, is that you can't do it with only digital. You've got to have that personal touch, that connection. You've got to start from a very small pool of supporters and then build your pool outwards. And you can't do that without having people who believe in you personally. And it's a leadership race is a very personal commitment two ways. It's a commitment from the supporter to say, I believe in you enough to trust you with my party, to trust you with my vote. And it's the same thing going the other way, where you've got to be able to create a genuine connection with that first group of supporters who are willing to fight for you, be on your digital campaign and move forward. And then you've got the challenge that every candidate faces as well. How do you fund all this? And that, of course, the digital game plays a huge role in that. None of this should intimidate women for being involved in a leadership race, because I think, one of the great things about digital is it's a great leveler of the playing field between, more well-known candidates and not well-known candidates. If you have a strong digital game and your message is connecting with members, you can really move the dial.
Not to mention that you're reaching so many more people, right? As we talk about rural areas of our country as well. Brianne, how has digital campaigning evolved in in leadership races, not exclusive to the Liberal Party?
Yeah, I think that I would start by just kind of echoing Hugh's last point about it kind of leveling the playing field, because it allows, instead of, the candidate having to travel all across the country, which they still do, you don't have to do it quite as much. They host virtual town halls. I know, we're getting these emails almost daily from, the various candidates that they're hosting a town hall, or they're hosting a Q&A, or they're hosting this or that. And anybody from across the country is able to go. So I think that's a really fantastic thing, but it doesn't eliminate again, the need to do the phoning and have those people on the ground and, be building up the support from kind of, the small grassroots areas. But, it does allow for that instant reach. It does allow for a little bit more accessibility, because there's often a lot of more rural spots that are forgotten, especially on a leadership tour. So it's really great that those folks can still have that experience and they can feel heard by the candidates and the team that's supporting them.
Well, in some cases, where we're on that thread, in some cases, for leadership races, the rules are determined so that each riding has the same weight as riding potentially in an urban center. And so connecting with folks in Fort St. John is equally as important as connecting with someone in like downtown Calgary, for example, right? And so digital campaigning is important for those reasons to Marla, in your years of experience, how have we kind of shifted into this digital campaigning world?
It's been remarkable to see the change in how we did a leadership campaign, in the early 2000s as compared to how we run campaigns now. And the digital campaign it's critical to any provincial election, federal election, or leadership race. It's reach, it's speed. How we do fundraising digitally is different. But the traditional way is still equally important. Those voters that want to hear from the candidate want to shake their hand. That personal connection, as Huw mentioned earlier, that touch is still really critical. I mean, it's got to be a really strong hybrid of both. And even though we are attached to our phones and we can get a text message in a second and find out there's a town hall, all of that is important. All of that helps to essentially what you want to do is build momentum in your campaign. But again, there's nothing better than hearing, your candidate's voice on the other end of the phone, or having them show up with their volunteers or their families knocking on your door at your community events. It's still critical to both. But yeah, digital is it's savvy for someone like me who's a bit of a Philistine when it comes to digital work. I'm in awe of what it's done, and what it continues to do, and what it will do in the future for campaigns.
Marla, I'm going to stay with you for this next question as we kind of pivot to outreach to diverse communities. How
Mhm.
do we tailor messaging and engagement strategies to different voter bases for leadership
Right.
races?
Well, one message, isn't for everybody. So we have to tailor the messages, to groups that want to hear about labor issues, or groups that want to hear about employment issues, or groups that want to hear about, you know, um, discrimination in the workplace, et cetera. So, you know, doing that work, I think, is important to have some key strategists on board that understand what's rural, what's urban, what issues are different, what might educators want, what might healthcare workers want, and working within those messages to talk to voters in a leadership or in an election campaign. These community leaders, ethnic media, all of them are important to building your movement, to building your momentum, and talking to them and having key voices in those areas, or key voices in those communities that share your vision, that promote your vision. I think is what will give you strength in your campaign, and what will help you grow your members and your base.
That's fantastic. Brianne, not I don't mean this in an ageist way, but as the freshest of us in campaigning, um, do you think that there's a difference between how we communicate and tailor messaging to our younger voters, the voters who are voting for the very first time, getting involved in a leadership race for the very first time, versus someone who has been through many campaigns before?
I absolutely, yes. And I think that even just the method of how it reaches people differs per age group and demographic. people in my age group might probably do tend to prefer like a digital. They might not like to pick up the phone. They might prefer a text. They might prefer an email. Whereas somebody in an older generation might want that phone call, or they might want some direct mail. So that itself is a difference. And it's also, you know, I wanted to agree with what Marla said about having somebody key in your community and, you know, key in each different community that can give you access and, you know, really help you understand. And when you have those people, not only can they, you know, again, help you get access, but they can help you understand. They can help, you know, sway the other members of that group. So I think that's really important, but I really think that, you know, first and foremost, it's like your method and like even how your campaign looks and is structured. I think when you asked that question, the first thing I thought of was Kamala HQ. That was very much towards my generation, and we loved it. We ate it up. And you know, you even see Chrystia Freeland doing something similar with like the Freeland HQ, very much driven towards, you know, the 20 to 35 age demographic. So I think that we're going to probably start seeing more of those things just to probably, you know, increase our younger voter turnout and interest. But I do think it's definitely shifting, and Kamala HQ kind of created a bit of a wave of a new way to kind of do social media and reach younger voters.
A trendsetter. I fall into the category of please do not call me. I will not pick up, but text me. Text me. I'm happy to respond. And Huw, it's getting to the point now where if I do respond, the AI side on the other side is responding to me as well for these new campaign tactics. So it certainly is working. Now, Brianne had kind of mentioned, Huw, that piece of sometimes it really is just a group of people connecting in the living room or in a kitchen because a block captain had organized the new potential members to join the race and to be eligible to vote. What sort of other engagement strategies work specifically for these special campaigns?
Yeah, I think I would just build on the other candidates and what they in your first question about diversity there. I think that one of the things that's a challenge with all leadership races is they're almost by definition insular in that you're only, you know, you start off with this preconceived notion, I'm just going to talk to party members. And campaigns have to go through that strategic decision to say, okay, listen, we're part of a diverse party. How do we reach the different parts of it? But there's also a pivot that takes place is, are you going to bring members into the party, sign up new members to make it to make it happen? And I think particularly if you're an underdog, you've got to recognize that, you know, I've got to pull people who may not be the traditional base into the party if I'm overall going to be successful. The one thing that all campaigns have to do on the digital side of the equation is they can't forget authenticity. You can try to reach out to diverse groups. You can try to you know, talk about women's issues, but unless you're authentically believing in it and you've got a track record and your message is absolutely authentic, you can't be successful. And I would, you know, just echo Brianne's comments about the great leveler of digital. If you look at President Obama's campaign, which was really the first, you know, to consider the historic election of the first Black president, he was able through authenticity and through digital to go from being a junior senator in Illinois to being a believable candidate by really focusing on that digital game. And obviously, you know, parties have taken notice of that and over the past decades expanded it radically. But it all starts with the authenticity. You can't take somebody whose message isn't authentic to different groups and turn them into a magic just by sending a text or an email.
I'm going to stay on this topic of tactics that are unique to leadership races because some parties require you to pay for the membership, which is not as easy as going to the door during a general election and say, can I count on your vote? And you go around the corner and go vote in a general election. In some cases, you have to buy the $10, $15 membership to a political party in order to be an eligible voter in the leadership race. So now the stakes are higher because now we're asking for money. And so I'll open this to anyone who wants to answer it and chime in here. How do we campaign to those who now have to fill out a little bit of paperwork versus a general, yeah, sure, I'll support you. It's on my way to work. I'll go vote for you.
I'm happy to take the first stab at it and be corrected by
Go
the
for it.
other panelists. I think it's a fundamental challenge to democracy. I mean, we have people elected, and we're going to have a new potential prime minister over the next little while who's only been elected by Liberals, and of course, all parties have had a similar situation provincially and otherwise. But it's a very party membership is a very narrow bandwidth of Canadian society, and I think as democracies, that's a challenge because membership in a party does cost money. It does take there's a higher bar of commitment, and so to some extent, that's a challenge we've got to figure out. Obviously, people have talked about different models and versus the first past the post, which would enable some, I think, flexibility in that. But I think given the system that we have, I think I would just use this as an opportunity to again encourage people to become involved. Pick a party, and it doesn't have to be your party for life. Provincially, federally, the parties are sometimes a mix, and you can as Brianne mentioned, work for the NDP and then the Liberals within the same province, federally, provincially. Quebec has a similar dynamic. Get involved. The barrier and the effort to do it always pays back. I mean, I know so many young women who've become involved in politics, and at the end of the day, even if their candidate didn't win, the experience, the connections, the difference going forward is absolutely life-changing in many ways.
That's so true. I'm really glad that you added that very important point, Huw, of just because you are a card-carrying member of a political party today doesn't mean that it necessarily has to stay the same your entire life. You are more than welcome to.
Yeah, exactly. And people feel like that, Allie. You're so right that you're like, okay, I don't want to make this choice because I might be a different person at 30. So, but that shouldn't be a barrier for getting involved.
Well, leadership changes as well, right? So you could very well be joining the party for that one leader, for that one candidate, but then those people end up retiring or not being successful in their campaigns, and so we follow people as well. Does anyone want to add to what Huw was saying? That's okay, because this
I
is
think he
my
was cute.
favorite question. The next one is what is the biggest challenge in leadership campaigns and what lessons have you learned? I'll start with Marla and then Brianne, you're up next.
I think one of the challenges that I encountered, especially working on a federal leadership campaign, was fundraising. They're expensive to run leadership campaigns. They can last months, and they can last weeks, or they could last months. I mean, it's really difficult to do the fundraising, to reach everyone nationally, and you need money in order to do direct mail, in order to do any media buys, if you do a media buy or even a digital buy. So getting that support and fundraising is really key, and a challenge that I found. Having the right people doing the fundraising is also really critical. How they talk to people, how they approach endorsements, how they approach key organizations, labor. I mean, you need that to be a very confident, a very trustworthy and genuine individual, or individuals who will bring money to your campaign. And it's a tough one for sure. And also your candidate, whoever your leadership candidate is, your provincial candidate also has to be that person that is charming and, as Huw said earlier, authentic and genuine, and you want to win them over, and they're going to be a valuable asset to helping fundraise could be a short time, could be a long time, but it's critical.
Marla, we are political sisters here because fundraising is, oh my gosh. And then, I was part of a leadership race where you don't get a tax receipt for the provincial leadership race here in BC. And so not only are you finding a challenge in fundraising, but the person on the other side, the donor, does not get the incentivization of a tax receipt either. So, oh boy, what a year that was. Brianne, what are the biggest challenges in leadership campaigns, and what lessons have you learned?
Absolutely. I mean, right now we have a very short timeline. So that is our biggest challenge right now, is how to meet the most people, make the most voter contact in like a month. So, that means doing tours that is like you're in one province for one day, one province the next day, like it's heightened, but people understand that. So they're a bit more, understanding of the fact that we can't be everywhere all the time. But I would actually say that one of the biggest sort of things that I've noticed is more of the internal dynamics within the party. And something that worried me going into a leadership is just division amongst folks in the party. Especially before you're going into a general, you want to be united, you want to be behind one person. And it's hard when people are working very, very hard for one candidate, again, for this very heightened 1 month. And they're very confident with their candidate. They want their candidate to win. And, if it's not their outcome, that division within the party is something that I do worry about and I think could be a big challenge. Um, I'm not really seeing, I will say I'm not seeing too much of that, but it is something that I do think about going into it. But again, like echoing what Marla said about fundraising, I mean, that's like, yeah. I mean, especially again, in a month, fundraising is like not super fun. Yeah, no, I think that it really is just honestly making the most voter contact within, the shortened time that is the biggest challenge right now.
Fundraising is fun for
Can I
some,
add something?
but
Sorry.
not for me. Marla,
Can I
yes.
jump in here? Because,
Yeah.
Brianna made a great comment about the divide that happens in parties amongst your friends, amongst your colleagues when you're on opposing, teams. And I find that that's so heartbreaking, right? But you have such a passion for that person who you want to be leader, and you really feel that they could make a change. And the other person feels the exact same way. So, some of the biggest arguments I've ever had, or long-term frosting of a friend, has been during a leadership campaign. But there's one story I wanted to share that kind of changed my perspective. Is during the leadership when Jack Layton won, and everyone was really surprised because how could Jack, a councillor from Toronto, suddenly become the leader of the NDP? And we have Bill Blakey, who has spent years and years as a treasured MP on all levels, from all sides. And Jack is winning, or Jack has won, I'm sorry, and he's on the stage and he said, where's Bill Blakey? Oh my God, where's Bill Blakey? He wanted to thank him. And Bill said, I'm right behind you, Jack. And it changed the nature of things from the get-go, because he was like, I'm right behind you. I'm always going to be behind you. And they forged a really strong friendship. And not only that, they relied on each other for advice. So there is sometimes, bringing together of people, and they decided that unity was the best way to bring the party together, and that's what they did. It was really amazing. So just wanted to share that little
That was the
story.
perfect story. It was the perfect story, Marla. I feel like now we're getting into the goods of a leadership race. This
Yeah.
is truly the difference between a general election
Yeah.
and the internal dynamics of a leadership race. Huw, over to you.
Yeah, I would just echo what's been said. I mean, the battles within a leadership campaign are highly personal. I mean, I've been in the room when candidates have had, fellow caucus members betray them and call them just before a debate and say, listen, I'm supporting somebody else. I mean, it's so personal in a way that is a fight within in the family. And, in my own case, I can think of a literal, I'll call it a screaming match, as it was, between myself and somebody else on another campaign, that we ended up both apologizing to each other about 2 years later for letting our emotions get the best of us. But we were both so invested in our candidate that these things can get out of hand, and it's just a reminder for us all to go, yes, we can be invested, yes, we need to be passionate, but remember that it's bigger than just the race itself, and parties have a challenge coming back together, particularly when they're divided, and there's lots of examples in history that have done that. So and on the money theme, I think that's one of the biggest challenge, and lots of candidates, and it's something that we have to address, particularly under the banner of equal voice. Want to be out there, fighting for public policy, but they might not be comfortable asking for money. And so it's a very tricky element that you've got to be able to build a team around you of people who are comfortable asking for money on your behalf, because you've got to build that first kernel of, are you somebody that people believe in and can align with, and then very quickly move to the stage of that you're credible. And then the next stage is, can you fund it and sustain it going forward, because people are voting with their dollars every day. And I think on the just personal side of the equation, all of us need to go, and everybody's in a different circumstance, but any amount that you invest is a worthy investment, no matter how small it is, and can make a tremendous difference early on in the leadership race. So if you believe in somebody and you're able to make that contribution, it can make a real difference in the future shape of what a leadership race looks like.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I have time for one more question before I move it over to the Q&A from those who are participating and tuning in, listening to our wonderful discussion. As a reminder, you absolutely can ask a question of this powerful team that we have here today. So Huw, I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Marla. What is the one thing you wish potential leadership candidates knew going into a race?
I would say that how they'll come out of it, a changed person for the better. I mean, every candidate that I've been close to, even on campaigns that I was opposing, all of them came out with it with just a refreshed belief that politics is a valuable pursuit, and they come out of it with lifelong friends, which I certainly know in my case is an element. So don't be afraid to get involved.
That's perfect advice. Marla.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree 100% with what Huw said, but there's going to be moments, to be prepared for, I'm going to be the negative one, for betrayal, or
yes, be prepared for betrayal.
hurt feelings. And at some point you have to understand that it is politics. Not everything is going to resonate with you or be your cup of tea, but it's the party and the leader at the very end of the day that will bring your issues or your ideas forward, and to park that, put it aside, and build. And it is a time of a rebirth, when there's a new leader, and a rebuild. It can be two things, and I think that that's critical for anybody getting involved in leadership race, to know that it's a bumpy road, and it can be a very bumpy road, but at the end it can be a really amazing thing to see in the growth of your party, and the growth of people in your party, and what you can ultimately achieve. And if the goal is to be government, then you've got to stand behind your new leader, regardless if you supported them or not, and know that there's a hope. There's hope to do exactly what you set out to do, and be a part of that movement.
Brianne, finish us off with the wise words of what you would advise to someone going into a leadership campaign.
I would definitely echo what Marla just said about the party growth. I think especially right now with the Liberal Party race, we are seeing a unanticipated growth. It was much larger than what we expected. Especially, I've been working with, Mark Carney's team, and it's been just this exponential support and growth that it can almost be overwhelming. So, just knowing that you're trying to, you still have to build up that trust and that credibility, and grow the party. And I think one thing that I did also kind of want to touch on is that, you kind of see different leaders. Some leadership candidates take a more policy-driven approach, and some take a more people-driven approach. So working with Joyce Murray for the past 3 years, who was the leadership candidate second to Justin Trudeau in 2013, is something that she typically tends to hammer home for me, is that she was a more policy-driven, whereas he was the more people-driven. So I think that that's another really interesting point just to think about is it seems that the people-driven approach seems to be the more successful one. But it really is about, the memberships and growing the party and growing the trust and credibility and within your party.
Well, it definitely goes back to a lot of what we were saying at the very beginning of members, 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 right? And if the policy drives memberships, that's wonderful and great, and that would work. But if it's just a focus on members, 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 then and maybe not everybody is as enamored with the nitty-gritty details of policy as well. I want to thank you all so much for indulging me in our prepared questions. I do have one question from one of our lovely participants, and I'm going to read it out because I don't want to do her dirty and potentially misconstrue this question here. And then I'll open it to anyone who wishes to answer it. And she says, some municipalities across Canada have been part of a party system for a long time, while others are newer to it. Alberta has only recently moved to a party system, with municipal elections happening across the province on October 20th this year. For those who have more experience with municipal party politics, how does this impact diverse candidates running, including women, people of color, Indigenous people? How do they navigate that type of changing landscape, especially at a time when there is exacerbated divisiveness in increasing disproportionate forms of violence against diverse populations? So I think that the core of this question is, how do we get people involved in the changing landscape of municipal party dynamics here in BC, particularly in Vancouver? We are very familiar with parties on the municipal side of things. Other jurisdictions, not so much. Does anyone want to dive into this?
I'm happy to take a first stab at it. I think that it's such an important question and particularly well phrased. I think the nature of the question, the fundamental part of it has to do with partisanship overall. And I think there's a very disappointing trend in Canadian politics, but certainly North American politics, when we look at our neighbors south of the border, where we're in a hyper-partisan world, and people are defining every interaction they have in terms of partisanship, and it's unhelpful for us coming together in collective ways. And so there used to be a time where people from different parties could complement each other and talk to each other and learn from each other. And I think we need to hopefully move back to that world. At the municipal level, the questioner is exactly right that used to be an element of politics that was devoid of partisanship, and that you had individual candidates who were community builders or community activists who could step forward and participate in democracy based on their kind of community sphere, and it was a relatively open process with respect to it for that. I do worry that the move to partisanship at the municipal level will actually make it more difficult to get diverse voices to the table, and I think have that joint problem of having voices that are opposed for the sake of being opposed. Log jam up us making progress at a very important level of government.
I would love to jump in. Allie, you mentioned in BC, the party system in municipalities is increasing, and I absolutely agree, especially here in Vancouver. We currently have a municipal by-election going on, so this has been kind of something that's been on my mind. And I think parties are a wonderful thing. It provides support networks and organizational support, and it's wonderful. However, to echo what Huw just said, it totally creates a barrier to entry, and it creates this hyper-partisanship, this division. it used to be, again, as Huw said, you can just join the race if you're somebody that loves your community and wants to support your community. It's now, oh no, you have to be connected with this person specifically within this party to be able to join. And I do agree that I do unfortunately think that it will negatively affect marginalized communities, because that means that, if you're not known and if you're, a less represented community, that, you're far less likely to be able to kind of crack in and join, especially here in Vancouver.
Not to mention, Brianne, some municipal political parties also require a certain amount of fundraising in order to be part of that team as well, or an expectation that they have to raise $50,000 in order to be part of the exclusive club. So, as we talk about the challenges of fundraising and emphasize that a lot during this discussion today, it certainly would keep some great candidates, potential candidates, out of the race. Marla, do you wish to add to that?
I do want to add, because I do agree with everything Huw and Brianne said, absolutely, and I think it does really marginalize people who want to be a part of municipal races. But it's more of an urban problem. Like it really is, be like a Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary. There is some positiveness in municipalities that are smaller but still significant, that still really rely on that person who will support their ward. So for those who are on the call, and not to negate what the person who asked the question is saying, but for those on the call who think about running municipally, because it's a great springboard into getting into provincial and federal politics, and to build your build your sort of rapport with the community, but also build build who you are, right? So that when you do run provincially or federally, you've made a name for yourself. It's that simple. But in the smaller communities and smaller cities, I still feel that it's still, up to the person, the personality, the popularity, and how they work their wards to become a municipal councillor. In Toronto, we have Progress Toronto, which you see has had a real powerful impact on the slate of city councillors that we currently have, including our mayor. And they're a force, an organizing force to be reckoned with. They're fantastic. But, it doesn't speak to every community in Canada, which is a good thing, I think.
Okay, we are getting close to time. I do want to allow for each and every one of you wonderful panelists to share a final thought about leadership races. I'll start with Huw and on to Marla after.
So that was to me. Yeah, yeah. I heard you as opposed to Huw, so I apologize. I would just thank the participants who are on the call today, but also those that are going to watch this in the future. And again, encourage you to get involved in politics in whatever way possible. And you don't have to go all in and take a role in a leadership campaign, but you can help out and get your feet wet and be part of it. And you'll find it an engaging and interesting experience. And then you may find yourself a candidate down the road after you've built that political experience, built that knowledge, because the best introduction to politics maybe sometimes isn't jumping right into being a candidate. It's having some experience and idea how it all works and how you feel about it before you jump in.
That's wonderful, Huw. Thank you so much. Marla.
Thanks everyone for being a part of this call today. It was great to work with Brianne and Huw, and you as well, Allie. Similar to what Huw had mentioned, and however you want to be involved and it's important to you and an issue is important to you, get involved. It's totally worth it. Whether you have aspirations to be a candidate or just be a part of a group that cares about, our future and wants to see a better environment, then get involved in any way. Volunteer, do a phone bank, canvas. That's the best way, is door knocking. I used to love door knocking and talking to people and really hearing their perspective and maybe having, an impact to change their perspective. So I do think that, this is an exercise for anyone to be a part of the political landscape, is getting involved, even if it's one time or 100 times, but it's incredibly rewarding and I think important work. So not to be afraid of it.
Don't be afraid indeed. Brianne, any final words?
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to my panelists, or the panelists that I've been on here with today. And thank you, Allie. You did a great job as moderator. And I just want to echo, just to get involved. It's really fun. You create a community, which is really what got me involved in the first place. It's so fun. You have such crazy experiences and you meet such cool people. I really encourage everyone to do it, even if it's just a little bit, just again, as Huw said, just getting your feet wet, just trying it out. And if not a leadership in the general, because people always need volunteers, they will always want you. So don't be afraid. Everyone's very nice. They want you there. They need you there. So please get involved.
And they'll feed you as well.
Yes, that's right. A lot of tidbits.
A lot of Timbits, a lot of pizza.
A lot of tidbits.
The staples of any good campaign. And Brianne, such a great plug for just getting involved in absolutely any campaign, especially since we might be in an election very soon. Who knows? Thank you so much to the panelists. Thank you so much to Equal Voice for putting us together for this very timely discussion. It was amazing. Thank you to you all, and enjoy your day. Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Great job, Allie. Thank you. Thank you, Equal Voice. Bye.